Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fierce Conversations with Toby, the show where we discover the silver lining in life's most difficult stories. I'm your host, Toby Dorr. Hi, everyone. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to my guest, Cathy Harvey. Cathy and I met at a writers' conference, I think it was 2019, and she had the most amazing story, and she's working on her own book. So I'm going to let her share her story without doing too much interjection because her story is certainly something that's gripping. So welcome, Cathy. I'm so delighted to have you here.
I am so excited to be here, Toby. Thanks for inviting me. I was delighted to get your email and invitation.
Well,
Good to see you again.
Yes, it's great to see you too, even though this time we're digital, but gosh, that's how the whole world works anymore, isn't it?
Yeah. Thankful for that.
Yeah, it's a blessing, really. So I have an odd question that I like to start all my podcasts off with, and it drives my husband crazy because he thinks it has no purpose, but my listeners like to know, what's your favorite color and what does it mean? What does that color say about you?
I wrote a poem about that.
Oh, really?
In fact, I wrote two because I have a hard time deciding. I'm an artist, as you can see with my craft supplies behind me. That question has plagued me most of my life. However, I think one of my very favorite colors is peacock blue.
Oh, that's dramatic.
There's a richness to it. And I wear a lot of red because red looks good on me because of my hair. And I like red and I like ruby red. It's those royal colors.
Yes.
The emerald green and the sapphire blue and the ruby red. So those are colors that I tend to gravitate toward. I like them all. It's a terrible decision for me to make.
I have so many books about color here next to my desk. And the other day, my husband said to me, I wonder how they came up with paint colors. I said, I have a whole book about that, where all the pigments were discovered. And I pulled it out and he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you.
And colors. The fact is I love color and I love colorful things. Yes. And I love flowers of all kinds because they're colorful and it makes me happy.
I do too.
So
I always said my dream job would be the person that gets to name the paint colors.
Really?
On those paint chips, you get to pick the names of those colors.
That's so hard.
It would be so fun. I think I would love it. Anyway, let's dig into your story, Cathy. So your story is an unbelievable story that it's based on a tragic event, but you've turned it into something beautiful. So I'm just going to turn over to you to share your story with us.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping in the future our story won't be so unbelievable. I hope it'll become more common.
It needs to.
Yeah. And it really wasn't all my doing. It really was the power of love and the power of God in our life that helped us get through this. And so let me explain that our daughter, her name was Anna. She was an 8-year Army veteran and a single mom when she came home she was in 911 in the war. And due to a medical condition, she was unable to drive, which was annoying for her, but she was very healthy, studying health and wellness, personal wellness. And so she ran, jogged, biked everywhere. She was very strong. And we invited her to come live with us after she got out of the military. At that time, she was a single mom and she had 2 girls with her and one had been adopted out by her brother, our son. So she came and lived with us and she had been there for 8 years. And one day, this was back in 2013 already, I can't believe how much time flies, but I was just scurrying around the kitchen in the morning, grabbed my jacket to head off to work. And she was not a morning person, so I kind of had to tone down my chipper, morning bird stuff till she woke up on a couple cups of coffee. But all of a sudden I remembered it was her 34th birthday. And I was at the coat closet getting my coat on, and her 2 little girls had come down, and they were 7 and 10. And trying not to be too chipper, I just kind of gently said, "Happy birthday, Anna." And her 2 little girls thought that was so fun. They forgot it was her birthday and they giggled. And I grabbed my coat and headed out the door, and I had no idea those were my last words to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a Facebook person at the time, and people were pinging her all morning, wishing her happy birthday. Even the girls' bus driver knew her. She was very social. She always talked to the bus driver when she put him on the bus, and the bus driver even wished her happy birthday. So she put her 2 little girls on the bus that morning, and she had 4 classes left to finish her degree in health and personal wellness at the community college. And so she signed off her Facebook that morning with 4 words: "Getting near the end."
Oh.
And that kind of haunted her friends later on that day. You don't know when you type those words that your end is less than 8 hours later.
Yeah, we never know, usually. Yeah.
We never know. So I was really grateful that my last words to her were so positive, that we hadn't had an argument or something.
Yes.
Mother-daughter things can be.
They cannot be so
when you're living under the same roof.
Yes.
But anyways, Anna biked all over. We talked about the safety issue. There weren't a lot of sidewalks around here. And so we tried to drive her, as much as we could. And my husband worked a second shift. And so he loaded up her bike. She had community college classes that started at noon, and he was a second shift person. So he loaded up her bike in the car, and he dropped her off at the community college just 5 miles from our house. So she could ride home after class around 2:00 and be here when the girls got off the bus after school, which she did every single day. And so after her classes, because there weren't always sidewalks where she was biking off the road on a 2-lane highway on the gravel shoulder. And when she was about 2 miles from our house, a young man in a car traveling opposite. He was going south, and she was coming north, and she was on. They were on the same side of the road, but she was off on the gravel. And he took his eyes off the road for, what do we say? Just a moment.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
Yeah, and it was just a 2-lane highway, and he wasn't speeding, he wasn't texting. He wasn't under the influence of anything, but he was looking off the road, and he didn't see her at all, and his car veered just ever so slightly over that white line, and he hit her, almost head on. And he told the officer in the corner that he noticed that the sun had come out after a light rain earlier in the day, and so he was looking over his left shoulder for a rainbow. And then he heard a thump. And that was it for Anna's timeline. She passed away within minutes right there, hit in the ditch off the road. So on my end, shortly after 5 p.m., I was hustling to get home because I knew one of our granddaughters had a dance lesson that night that I had to take them all to. But I got home a little after 5, and nobody was home. I thought it was kind of strange. And I called out, and I thought I'd hear the Disney Channel on and Anna upstairs, clacking away on the keyboard. But it was quiet. And I thought, well, maybe she thought I was going to be late. She was post-military. She was very on time kind of person. I thought maybe she asked the neighbor for a ride, And so I sat down and turned on the TV. I still had my coat on. I made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because I knew we were going to be late if we went to dance class. I texted her to see where she was. I thought, well, if someone's driving her, she's hands-free. But shortly thereafter, there was a knock on the door, and 2 men dressed in black were standing there.
They always wear black, don't they? See, when they come knocking at your door?
Well, it was the coroner and a deputy sheriff. That was their uniform.
Yeah.
I didn't know who they were. I thought they were police. I thought they were fundraising. That's the only other time a policeman has knocked on my door. They were fundraising. And they asked if Anna Harvey was home, and I said, no, but I'm her mom. She lives here. I'm the homeowner. And they didn't introduce themselves. They said, can we come in?
Oh.
And I thought that was strange because when police officers had come to our door fundraising and I invited them in, they always said, oh, no. So I thought that must be a policy. They don't step into the house. They just stay on the front porch, But he asked if they could come in. And so I didn't know any better. I didn't sense anything wrong. I opened the door and I said, sure. And for about 2 seconds, my stomach flared up like, oh my gosh, they might hurt me. I didn't even ask for any ID. Who are these guys? But then I thought, I just didn't sense any danger. And I thought I was being a little dramatic. So I just stepped back into the living room and the one man who later turned out to be the coroner invited me to sit down. And I thought, this is really odd. They're inviting me to sit down in my own house.
In your own house, yes.
So they sat and I sat opposite them. And then he asked for my ID again. And I'm like, this is just strange, I didn't have any premise that anything was wrong because Anna was very independent. If she couldn't get around one way, she figured out a way to get around another way, And after the fact, I realized he didn't want to tell this news to the wrong person.
Oh.
So I said, well, I've got my driver's license. Do you want to see it? I'm Cathy Harvey. Do you want to see it? And he's like, no, that's okay. I think he felt pretty sure. And then without any clue, he still didn't introduce himself. He didn't say, I'm coroner so-and-so. Mrs. Harvey, I have some really difficult news for you. He just said one sentence. And he just looked me in the eye and he said, your daughter was riding her bike on Highway 45 and was hit by a car and killed. Ugh. And I went, did I just hear what he said? And the words, it's weird what your body does. But I saw the words circle around my head in digital, kind of like the New York Stock Exchange. You know how they show that? That's what it did around my head. The very exact sentence went around my head like that. And I thought, how are you supposed to respond to this? Who teaches you how to respond to this?
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to cry, but I don't want to cry in front of these two men. I want them to go away now, But here's one unusual thing. In the first 4 seconds after that coroner said that, you know what my first emotional response was?
No.
I felt relief for Anna. And let me tell you why. Anna had a really struggled life. And she was abused by men, used and abused. The father of the girls was not kind to her. He didn't support her financially. Life with him was really hard. She was living with us with the girls and trying to share visitation. It was really, really stressful. Plus, trying to get around without a car. Can you imagine your life always having to ask for rides every time you want to go somewhere? She had a really struggled life. And I knew the background. And I knew things that other people didn't know. I knew she had been raped when she was in high school. I knew some of the men that had abused her. And so I felt relieved because I knew where my daughter was. Because she believed in Jesus Christ, she trusted him to forgive her sins. She had eternal life. And based on what the Bible says, absent from the body, present with the Lord, I really believed Anna was in heaven. And so I felt relieved for her. But then it took about 15 seconds for me to think about the girls, and my body had a physical reaction and started to quiver from the inside out really bad. And that scared me because it was out of my control. And I put my hands to my face and I said to the coroner, I said, oh, the girls. What about the girls? And your brain works in lightning split seconds. And I thought, they got on the bus this morning with a mom.
Yeah.
And they got off without one. And I said, the girls, what about the girls? And he said, do you have a relative, Nathan? They're with Nathan. And I said, no, we have a neighbor across the way, like as the crow flies, a couple blocks. But if you have to take the street route, it's about a mile almost. But we can cut through the backyards and, get to their house in, a few minutes. he said, they're with Nathan. And I just immediately had, okay, they're fine. They're good. But then I looked at him and I said, what do I do?
Oh,
I'm a doer.
yeah.
And what do you do with this situation? So he said, why don't you make some phone calls? So I had the presence of mind to understand in this internet age, word gets around pretty quickly. So I wanted to talk to the right people in the right order. And even though Anna didn't have the best of relationships with the girl's dad, we had a friendly relationship with him because they had shared visitation and the girls went to his house every other weekend. And I knew I should call the dad first. So I called the dad, and it was really kind of miraculous that I got a hold of him. He wasn't home, and I happened to have his parents' number, and it was a Thursday, and I called them, and his mom shouldn't have been home because she has class, but all three of them were there at his mother's house. And she answered, and I said, I'll just call him Jack. That's not his name, but I'll say, is Jack home? Is Jack over there? And she's like, yeah, he's right here. She's like, hi, how you doing? And I just said, fine. I wasn't fine, but, I wasn't to tell her, And I said, is Jack over there? And she's like, yeah, he's right here. I said, can I talk to him? And so I said, I thought I'm going to give him a little warning, not like what the coroner did to me. And I said, Jack, listen, Anna was biking home from school. And I said, I've got some really sad news for you. I said, Anna was biking home from school. She was hit by a car and she was killed. And he just said, I'm very sorry to hear that. I'll come right over. Well, come right over. He was in a suburb of Chicago, 45 minutes away on a good day.
Wow.
And now it's 5:30 or so. So he's got to come through 5 o'clock traffic. So I knew he wouldn't be there for at least an hour and a half. And so that's all I said to him and got off the phone. And I said, should I call my husband? He said, yeah. And I said, should I tell him on the phone? He said, no. Getting hold of my husband was hard. He works in a large postal distribution and sorting plant that's about 2 football fields big. And I never call him, only for emergencies. And in my lifetime, and we've been married almost 50 years, I've only called him 3 times at work.
Wow.
And all 3 times was a medical emergency with Anna. And so he said, don't tell him. I got the number, and I'm like, oh, God, please let this call go through. It's always like a real staticky, walkie-talkie, kind of thing. And somebody picked up right on the first ring, and I just calmly said, this is Cathy Harvey, Steve Harvey's wife. I do have a medical emergency. Is he there? Can I talk to him? And he said, sure. And he paged him, and lo and behold, Stephen was standing just feet from a phone. And he picked up the phone, and it was clear as day. It was like he was standing right next to me. And so I said, Anna's been in an accident, and it's pretty bad. Can you come home? And he said, should I go right to the hospital? And I paused to pretend like it wasn't a big emergency because I wanted him to be calm while he drove home. And I said, no, come home. I want to be with you. And I hung up because I was afraid if he asked a follow-up question, I didn't know what to say. And he thought that was a little weird, but, I just said, come home. I want to be with you. So that's how that happened. And I really wanted the coroner and the deputy sheriff to leave because I needed time to process. I needed time to think and pray and be still and put on some music and just figure out how am I going to tell my husband this. But they didn't want to leave me alone until someone was going to be with me. And I realized it was out of the kindness of their heart they were doing it. So I tried to think of things that my husband might ask. And so finally, when I told them, that they weren't going to be here for another hour, they kind of sighed, and I felt bad for them. I'm sure they had plenty to do. But finally, it was time for them to leave. And I thanked them for coming. And I said, I'm so sorry you have to deliver this kind of difficult news. We're going to be okay. It's all right. We forgive him. And the coroner said, oh, no, you don't want to say that. And because I had just asked I just thought, oh, Stephen's going to say, well, what happens to the driver? Does he get a ticket?
Mm-hmm.
Does he pay a fine? Does he go to jail? And the coroner said, well, one or all of the above. It's up to the state attorney. And I didn't understand how the court system worked. It wasn't the Harveys versus the driver.
Yeah.
Now, someone had been killed, so now it's a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's the state of Illinois.
Yeah, and
versus
you're kind of removed from any control.
Yeah. So he said that, and then I was thanking him, and I made that comment about, it's okay, we forgive him. And he said, oh, you don't want to say that. And I said, yes, I do. And I thought, oh, he's thinking we're going to sue them or something like that, And the example I'm going to give right now, I can't remember how many times I repeated it to different attorneys, whoever was working on our case. And I said, no. I said, let me explain it this way. There's consequences and there's forgiveness, but they're two different things. And I said, the neighbor boy can hit a ball through our window and break the window, and I can forgive him, but he sure as well better come over and fix the window or pay for somebody to fix the window. So I can forgive him and there can be a consequence, but I don't have to be hateful about it.
You don't have to want revenge and demand.
And so that really confused everybody. They weren't used to that kind of response.
Our society isn't. If you watch the news, when some accident like that happens and they talk to the family and they always say, we want them to get the maximum sentence. We want justice. We don't have our loved ones, so why should they have theirs? And it doesn't make things better.
It doesn't. And I didn't know until about 5 years later. Actually, I jump ahead a little bit. I was back in the state attorney's office. This had all been solved and resolved, and I was bringing something to his office, and I said, "Do you remember me?" And he said, "Yeah, remember you. We tell your story all the time." He said, "Usually when families come in and something like that has happened," and the more he talked, the more emphatic he got, like almost violently emphatic. I started to tear up and shake. He said, and he hit the desk every time he made a point. He said, when something like this happens, the families want the person to go to jail. They want them to rot in jail. They want the jail to rot on top of them, and they want another jail built on top of that. And every time he hit his hand, he just got louder and louder. And I just started to shake, and I backed up, and I'm like, oh, no, we never would have wanted that. So let me go on and tell you what happened. So this happened on a Thursday, and the following Wednesday, we had her funeral. And then the day after, a week, it would be exactly a week, Thursday. I don't know how to explain this to your audience if they're not believers and they don't understand, but to those who understand and believe in the Holy Spirit in our lives and God in our lives and working, I sensed a still small voice say to me,
that's my favorite scripture, the still small voice. I mean, that's really special to me. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Call the mom. And actually, I'll be honest with you, Toby, I heard that voice the day before the funeral to call the mom. But it seemed so crazy. I thought, there's no way I'm going to explain this to my husband. He's not going to understand. And I pushed it aside because we were doing so many funeral plans. But then we had the funeral. And then the next day, it's like the dust settles. Everybody goes home. Yeah. It's quiet. And, the company went home. And Stephen's in the basement working on the computer. And I heard that still small voice say, call the mom. Call her right now. Because I had ignored it 2 days
a couple days before.
Call her right now and tell her you're going to be okay. And it's okay for her to have a happy Mother's Day. We're going to get through this. It wasn't an accident. It was God's timing. And I have lived with the fact and the reality and the truth that we all have a timeline.
I believe that.
And God knows our timeline. He says our times are in his hands. And ever since my children were little, every time they walked out the door to school, I always hugged and kissed them goodbye because I was aware I might not see them again. And my teenage son, and he grew up to be a strong, robust Marine with all tattoos up and everything. And when he came in, he's like, when do you stop doing that, hugging and kissing? I'm like, oh, never. That's a human thing.
Yes.
And, I said, you go out the door in the morning to school. I don't know if you're coming back.
Mhm.
And I want the last thing to be that I hugged and kissed you goodbye.
Yeah.
And so I was very aware of this, not in a morbid way.
Mhm.
Not in a morbid way. I'm comfortable with death in the sense that I accept that it's going to happen.
Yes.
And I accept that I probably won't know when.
Mhm.
Some of us get a timeline, a medical timeline. You've got 3 weeks, you've got 2
Mhm.
years, but most of us don't.
We don't know when it's coming. Yeah.
And so I have lived aware of that intentionally. And so, anyways, I lost my train of thought.
You were calling the mom.
Oh,
Little
yeah,
small boys
call the
the mom. Mhm.
So I just think the Lord gave me clarity. And I went into the kitchen and I found the 1-page accident report that the police had given me. And on it was the driver's contact information. So I found the home phone number. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. I put on some quiet music. I sat down on the couch. I was all by myself. I called the number. I didn't even know what I was going to say. None of this is planned or scripted. And I thought, who's home at 2 PM anymore? Everybody works, But I wasn't going to push that voice away anymore. And so a lady answered the phone. And I said, I wasn't sure how to pronounce their name. I said, is this Mrs. So-and-so? And I heard this, yes. Like, who is this? And I said, this is Cathy Harvey, Anna Harvey's mom. And I just wanted to call and tell you we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And it's all right for you to have a happy Mother's Day. That was coming up Sunday.
What a beautiful gift of grace that was for her.
And she, when I said, this is Cathy Harvey, Anna Harvey's mom, she got real quiet on the other end. So I knew she recognized my voice and knew my name. And she said, actually, my husband's having a real hard time with this. And I didn't even think about the husband and the rest of the family. Stephen and I were really concerned about the driver. We did not want him to live under some umbrella of guilt all his life, because I sat down and tried to think, if I had killed somebody's child, what could they tell me to help me? And I couldn't think of anything. I thought, this will bother me for the rest of my life.
Yes.
And so we were very concerned about him. And I had learned from the coroner in the conversation we had while he was waiting with me that the driver had a disability. And I said, oh, I kind of perked up. And I still had my coat on, but I opened, my coat to show them my name tag. I worked at a college for students with intellectual disabilities. So I had a lot of compassion. And the coroner kept with the privacy laws, and he didn't say what his disability was, but that was part of the reason I had so much compassion for him, because I worked with these students every day. And I had an aunt that had cerebral palsy that I grew up with. So I told her, I said, the coroner told me your son had a disability. I said, he kept with the privacy laws and didn't tell me what they were, and she cut me off and she told me what they were. She was very open about it. And I said, well, I'm very concerned because I work at a college for students with intellectual disabilities. And my husband and I are very concerned on how this is going to affect him. Is he going to replay this over and over again? Some of our students get on a track. We call it perseverating. They perseverate. They just repeat over and over. Like 2 students will get in a squabble and one will just say the same thing over and over. And you have to kind of break that train of thought and help them calm down. And I said, how does this affect him? What does he need, to get past this? We're not angry. We're not bitter. The girls are ready to forgive him, but we just want to know what he needs to get over this. Does he just want to pocket it in the back of his mind and put it away? Does he want to write an apology? What does he need? You tell us. And the only thing I asked was that whatever he wants to do, please, we're just asking that you do it soon, because the girls are healing and they forgive him. And I don't want 3 months to pass and this wound has healed, and then all of a sudden they're confronted face to face with the driver, who hit and killed their mom, if he wants to apologize or something. And so we had a wonderful connection. I learned they were born again Christians, and we shared faith. And I was immediately drawn to her. I loved her. I cared about her. I thought, this is a mom who knows what I'm going through. I just loved her already. And we got off the phone. We didn't have any more phone call after that, but we already loved them. And they were fellow believers with us. And I just felt that we had brothers and sisters in Christ who were going through this horrible thing together. So I didn't hear anything for a little while. And all of a sudden, my husband comes to me. He got a phone call from our attorney. I always say we had two attorneys. One was the one that processed the accident and all the insurance and all that. And then there was a state attorney who I thought erroneously was working for us until I understood the court system. But the accident attorney called my husband one day and said, the driver wants to apologize and he wants to set up a meeting and apologize to you. And I said, okay. And then my husband said, and the attorneys are going to be there, his attorney and our attorney. And I'm like, oh, man, do they have to be there? I don't want them to be there because then we have to speak politically correctly and legally. And there's no warm fuzzies with the attorneys. I don't want them there. Can't we just meet them? And he's like, it's not going to happen if the attorneys aren't there. And later on, I found out from my attorney, they didn't even know if they could have a meeting with two wrongful death parties meeting before the court case. Is somebody going to show up with a gun and kill somebody? I mean, they didn't even know. The attorneys were on the phone with each other like, can we do this? So what happened was, the driver's mother, and I can say her first name. I can say their first names. They've given me permission. Linda went to her attorney. And in fact, she worked for a traffic court attorney. She was the administrative assistant to a traffic court attorney. And her office was across the street from the county courthouse where he was going to be tried. So she was familiar with all these legalese. And she told her attorney that her son wanted to apologize. And so he typed out an apology and the attorney had to approve it, and they wanted to have a meeting. And so that's why our attorney called us. The driver wants to have a meeting and he wants to apologize. And so we said, okay. And we set it up. It was about a month later. And it was my husband and I and the two little girls. And it was the driver, his mom and dad. And we invited his pastor and we invited my pastor and the two attorneys. And I had another friend from church who just sat in the corner and prayed the whole time. She was a biblical counselor. She never said a word. I don't think anybody else remembers she was there, but she was there praying for us. And I have to say, when our attorney walked into this conference room, we had it at our church, he just kind of like had little beads of sweat on his forehead, kind of deer in the headlights. He was sitting on the edge of his chair. He was really nervous. And everybody got there at the last minute. Their pastor wasn't able to make it, but the two attorneys were there. And a few days before all this happened, the Holy Spirit, again, that still small voice said to me, Cathy, write an acceptance letter. He's going to apologize, and the devil's going to mess with his mind after the meeting and say, oh, did the Harveys really forgive you? Were they just being nice? And he said, write an acceptance letter and have all of you sign your name, your husband, you, the little girls, print their name, that you accept his apology. So when he goes home, he has documentation. He can reread that the Harveys forgave him and don't want him to live under this banner of guilt. So I did that. And then 2 days before the meeting, the word flowers came into my mind. And I thought, oh, I want to give the driver's mom flower. I want to give the mom something, because don't we moms carry the emotional load of our families? I said, I want to give her something. So I looked online at what flower means forgiveness. And it was yellow daffodils or red tulips. Well, it was May. Well, no, it was June. Anna was killed on her birthday, May 2nd. And now it was the first week of June. So all the daffodils and tulips were spent, and none of the flower shops even had them. And I wanted live flowers. I didn't want artificial flowers. So I thought about what other flowers bright yellow, and I thought of sunflower.
Oh, yeah.
So I substituted the sunflowers for the daffodil, and I didn't look up what they meant because I didn't want them to mean jealous rage or something. I didn't look up what the sunflower meant. I just was using it in place of the daffodil. And I won't use up time telling the whole bouquet, but there was forgiveness and there was innocence for the girls and there was love and there was uh, a flower that represented heaven. And I just made a big, huge, beautiful bouquet and put it in a vase for her. So we went to this meeting with our acceptance letter and these flowers, and everybody was there. And when we got there first, and when the driver's mom, Linda, came around the corner into the conference room, oh my gosh, I just loved her so much. First of all, her name is Linda, which is the name of my sister. She was exactly the same height and size as my sister. And we just opened our arms to each other and wrapped our arms around each other and gave each other a hug. And I just felt like I was hugging my own sister. And I literally looked up to heaven and I said, like to the Lord in my mind, this is so easy. I just loved her so much. And we just had so much compassion for them, because actually the Saturday after Anna was killed, my husband and I had a conversation and we came to the conclusion they really had the harder burden to bear. Their son killed a single mom of 2 little girls.
And there's never any sympathy on the other side. There's never, I was thinking when I listened to you telling the story, how beautiful it was that you were concerned about the mother of the driver, because that isn't the norm. People just don't have sympathy. I think that's really tough. I think you could be right that your burden was easier to bear than theirs. I don't know. That's pretty eye-opening.
I mean, can you imagine? Your son kills a single mom of 2 little girls. Now they don't have a mom. So it was just such a beautiful meeting, and our pastor opened it up, and he knew I loved music, and he had quiet music playing in the background, and driver had this beautiful half page written all in capital letters. That is how our students did it. We had to teach them. Our students with disabilities don't type all in caps. It's like shouting at people. But it just was a tender thing to me to see that he typed it all out, all in caps, a half page, and he read it so graciously. And then pastor introduced that the Harveys have a letter they want to read to you. And I read the acceptance letter. Words just came to me. And we said, we don't want you to live with this guilt. We can't, it's too heavy of a burden to bear. The Lord Jesus bore that guilt for us on the cross when he died on the cross for all of us. So we forgive you. Yes, we accept your apology. We accept. And we all signed our names. And after the meeting, we switched letters and we went on our way, and I didn't see them again until the court case. So what happened in the meantime was the state attorney of Illinois was trying to figure out how to ticket him or what consequence he should get. And I didn't understand how all of this works. I thought, you hit somebody, there's a certain ticket for it, And so we had a meeting with the state attorney, and he explained it all. He's like, there's not one set ticket for certain things in this case where someone is killed. We also want to know what it will take to appease and satisfy the family. And at first, they actually weren't going to ticket him because they heard about the forgiveness meeting. And they called me on the phone while I was at work, and they told me that. I didn't have a very Christian answer. Right there in the office, I said, well, that's not fair. I said, if somebody doesn't get in their car and kill somebody and they don't get any consequence, he needs a consequence, first of all, to feel like he paid his debt. And then I explained again about hitting the ball through the window. You can forgive them, but there needs to be a consequence, but it doesn't have to be hateful and revengeful and bitter. So she said, so I agreed to go in and have a meeting. I didn't want to because I was missing so much work for so many meetings, but I said, we'll come in and we'll talk. So then I understood when the attorney told me how this all works. And they have to get the blood test back and the urine test back. And was he driving under the influence? And how many times before has he had a ticket? And so that's why on the news report, you always say that it's pending. Yes. Well, yeah, it's pending because it takes time to gather all this information and all these facts. So I said, he gave up his license the day of the accident. And when at the scene of the accident, when the deputy sheriff was talking to him, he was very open and said what his disabilities were. And he said, I take this medicine for it, and I took these meds this morning, and I have an Illinois driver's license, but I think I should give it up now. And he gave it up right there on his own. And of course, all the toxicology reports came back clear, and he wasn't speeding and all that. So when we were talking to the state attorney, I said, now he doesn't have a license, so now he can't get a job. So it's going to be very hard for him to pay for tickets or a ticket. And I said, can they ever transfer the amount of the tickets into community service hour? I said, I don't know how that works. Like if $1 is 1 hour or what? I don't know. But would that be a possibility? Could he just do community service in place of a payment of the tickets? He said, well, we'll see. We'll talk to the judge. We'll ask the judge. So I didn't know anything more about it. The next day, I wrote the state attorney a thank you letter because I could see how stressed he was in his job and explaining all this and trying to appease the families, and a very stressful job to do all that. So I was writing him a thank you note, and it just popped into my head in that moment about the community service hours. I said, Anna died on her 34th birthday. And she actually had 3 daughters. 2 lived with us, and 1 was adopted by our son during the 9/11 war. I said, what if we multiply 34 times 3 for the 3 girls and came up with 102 community service hours? Would that work? And he never answered. It was just one of those things he was going to ask the judge. So that was all in limbo. And so he went to talk to whoever his boss. He's like, we got this unusual case here, and I don't know how to charge this young man. So 5 months pass, and now finally it's the driver's day in court. And I wanted to go be there. They said I didn't have to be there. The state attorney would take care of it. And I thought, no, this is my life, and I'm going to show up for it. And my husband couldn't come to this one because he was working nights at this point and sleeping days, and he came to every meeting he could. But, I really wanted him to get his sleep, so I just went. And the state attorney's administrative assistant, her name was Deb, she kept inviting me to sit in the attorney's chair. So the court was set up with the judge's bench, and then like an L shape in front of it, there were long, wooden church pews where all the public people came. Every Monday morning was traffic court, and anybody could come. All the people that were being tried, and the public could go sit and watch. And they did this from 9 to noon every Monday. And then along the wall were nice big leather chairs where the state attorney could sit while he waited, or the attorneys could wait, and the victims' families could wait. And she kept inviting me to go sit with her, and I didn't want to. I wanted to sit next to Linda and the family. And I thought, no, because then that makes me the victim, and we're against them. And I'm not against them. I want to sit with them. We're walking through this together. So our case, or his case, I'll say, the driver's case, was supposed to be before court opened at 8:45 because they wanted to extend him the courtesy of privacy because he had killed somebody. Unfortunately, the state attorney on this case got hung up on a phone call, and he couldn't get there. So we were just all sitting in there with everybody else waiting our turn, and the attorneys come in and they sign in, and it's first come, first serve, and they call the cases in order as the attorneys come in and sign up. So finally, about 10 o'clock, the driver's case was called, and his attorney and the state attorney rushed forward to the bench and were whispering to the judge that they wanted to talk to him in his chambers because they had some things to explain to him before the case. And I could see he was annoyed. He was about 6'2". He was very commanding. He was one of the sternest judges in this circuit court. He didn't mess around. I watched him talk to the other people that came forward for their case, and he didn't even look at them. He looked one way, he looked the other way. He recited the laws by heart, and he's like, if you don't comply with this, it's Christmas in jail for you, buddy. You're dismissed. he had a lot. I counted 40 cases, 40 files on the
Wow.
table in front of us. He had to get through those from 9 to noon. And he just, he'd been doing this for a long time. So I could see he was very annoyed that they wanted a special meeting in his chambers, which is just off to the side, through a door. And he rolled his eyes and they're like, no, really, we have to explain some things to you before you hear this case. He's like, all right, fine, go take a break and come back later and I'll get through the rest of these cases. So we did leave. We left for almost an hour and we came back and fortunately the courtroom was almost empty. So the driver was going to have his privacy anyways. And so they called his name. He went forward with his parents. And then the state attorney called my name to the stand, Mrs. Harvey. And I looked at him and I just did I shook my head like, no, I don't want to go up there. This is the driver's day in court. It's not mine. And I'm no. And he puts on this big Cheshire grin on his face and he's waving at me. Yeah, come on. Yeah, smiling. And I'm like, oh. And I thought, well, holy cow, I don't want to be in contempt of court. This isn't even my try. So what could I do? So I went forward. So then it was the dad and the driver and Linda and me. I was standing next to her. This little short, adorable thing. She comes up to my shoulder a little bit. And I didn't even know what to make of all this. Because when they came back from from his chambers, the attorneys came out first and then the judge came out last. And I thought, he looks different. Something's up. And I thought to myself, he looks softer because he was very stern all morning. And I was trying to figure that out a little bit more, but then they called him up and I didn't have time to think on it anymore, but he just looked softer, So then I'm standing next to Linda and the first thing he says out of his mouth is my name. Boy, he really had my attention. And this is what happened. He said, Mrs. Harvey, your attorneys have told me what happened. This is a very horrible thing that has happened. And you've seen how busy this court is. And he nodded over to the table that had 40 cases that were now empty. And he was looking at me. He was kind of looking at that table. And then he looked right at me. And he said, your attorneys have explained to me the meeting and the letters you wrote. And in all my years on the bench, I have never heard of forgiveness. You have restored my enthusiasm for my job. And then he looked at me like he was waiting for a response. And I was trying not to cry. And I thought, oh, don't cry in court. Don't cry in court. And I thought, oh, God, please. What should I say? Where's a movie script when you need it? It was something profound to say to this judge or quote a verse or something. But I was just trying not to cry. And the tears were going to just fall down my face. And he was looking at me for a response. And so finally, I just gave him the slightest nuance of a nod, like, thank you. I heard you. And then he snapped out of that soft mode and he went back into stern judge mode and he looked at the driver and he said, do you understand the unusual number of community hours that you've been set to serve? And I thought, he got community service hours instead. So I was really happy about that. And it turns out he got 2 tickets, one for improper lane change and one for not being in control of his vehicle. And I don't know what the amounts were, but the judge accepted the 102 community hours that I requested for him to do instead. He still had to pay court fees, which I was a little bummed about, but of course you have to pay the court. And honestly, if I'd had the money, I was going to run down to finance and pay it for him, But I didn't have the money. But as it turned out, his mom told me he ended up getting the car fixed. Our daughter her face went through the windshield and broke the windshield pretty badly. And so he got the car fixed and her bike dented his fender and he got all that fixed. And the money that he sold it to his uncle and the money that he got for the car was almost exactly the fine that he got fined. And he had $20 left over. And so they were really, really relieved because the fines can be huge. One person had a fine of $1,200, and I dared to whisper to Linda in the courtroom, "Is that normal?" And she said, "Oh, he got off
Wow.
lucky. That's usually a lot
Wow.
higher." So, yeah. So, anyways, I started to leave the courtroom with Deb, the administrative assistant to the state attorney. And I stopped. The family, the driver's family, was up at the bench with the clerk of court signing papers. And I said to her, I said, in this brief time in the court system, I learned something. I said, there's no room for love here. It's one party against the other, and one person wins and one person loses. There's no room for love. And she looked at me and she said, "You're right." And so we walked out, and then the state attorney was walking out behind us, and we all stopped, the three of us in the hallway. And I said to both of them, and I was kind of nervous and my voice was kind of shaky, and I said, "What you saw in there was the power of God. That was the power of God's love." And I don't mean God up in the sky, an invisible blob. I mean, and I dared to say, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross to forgive us. And we just passed that forgiveness on to a fellow pilgrim bumbling his way through life. And sometimes you feel a wall go up when people don't believe the same like that. And there was no wall. They just were wide-eyed. And I said, I am so tired of stumbling over the name of Jesus. And Toby, I stumbled while I said it because I was nervous. I said, but I am so tired of this whole politically correct scene, and everybody gets to say their point of view, but we don't get to say ours. I said, I'm tired of it. And I'm going to give my point of view. It was Jesus Christ on the cross who died for us. That's how we all came out of this, friends.
And you and Linda have gone on to do something remarkable.
We have all gone on. Yeah, sometimes we speak together. And it's very powerful because as a speaker, I can say, oh, we're still friends with the family. Well, what can the audience do but believe me, But then I'll say something like, wouldn't you just love to hear the story from their end of it? What was this like from the driver's side? And I'll see a lot of people in the audience nod, oh, yeah, yeah. And then I'll say, well, you have a unique opportunity tonight because the driver's mother's here. And she's going to tell you. And then she comes up and we hug. And that's all the audience needs. It's so powerful. And she's so succinct and practical. And she adds so much to the story and so much depth. And at one point, all three of them, the dad, the mom, and the driver spoke with me at a church. And they each got up and told their side of the story. And when the driver's dad got up, he said, even though we had the forgiveness, we called it the forgiveness meeting in June, they worried the whole time up to the court case how this was going to play out. And to see, my ignorance was bliss. I thought that took care of it. I thought they knew we weren't going to charge them. We weren't going to sue them. But they didn't know what the state was going to do. And I didn't know how all that worked. But Linda worked in that system and she knew were they going to put him in jail? And can you imagine putting a person with disabilities in jail? And he said he cried into his pillow many a night. He said, I know my son's going to tick somebody off and he's not going to last 1 week in jail. And can you imagine? Now, we need to think about the ripple effect. If my husband and I had taken a bitter, hateful, revengeful stand, what that would have done to our two granddaughters who lived with us.
Yes.
I mean, you got to sit and think about that for a while. The ripple effect of that terrible attitude would have eaten all of us up alive. And there's no peace in that. And what about his family and him in jail? And what if he got killed in jail? I mean, there's a long ripple effect to what we do and what we say. And, sometimes we get a little glimpse. And we've been friends with them. We email. They ended up moving away for the dad's job. But we've been on vacation with them. They've been back here in Milwaukee. He's a model train buff, and they have a model train thing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we met them up there, and, we brought snacks and sat down. And, enjoyed the Train Fest. We've been up to Holland, Michigan to the Tulip Festival
Wow.
together. We had Easter breakfast together in church one year because they still, they had friends in the area. And so they're just friends. And when I see her, I don't think, oh, this is the mother of the guy that killed my daughter. We've never
Yes.
thought that. We just have always loved them from
I
the
think that is
beginning.
beautiful and
And I
so
think,
powerful. And it's not the norm. And it should be because nobody, when you hold a grudge and you remain bitter, you don't win. Bitterness is no
no.
place to live and be stuck. That's not a gift.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think,
It's
I think,
it's not the
Mhm.
norm, but it's
Mhm.
supernatural. This just we don't
Oh, I lost your sound.
but yeah, this is
Mhm.
supernatural love that comes
Yeah.
from God and um
And I think
it's
that's what we're meant to be as humans. That's what we're capable of, and I personally think social media is the worst thing that ever happened to humanity because people can say the most horrible things when they're not saying it face to face to someone. And it's turned us into spiteful, mean, unloving humanity. And that's not who we're meant to be.
well, the problem is that hiding behind the screen does not give us the
Mhm.
accountability. If we were doing that to someone's face, we might
Yes, I
think
agree.
twice. And then you really hurt a relationship. And then how do you
Mhm.
mend that? You know, so yeah, the accountability is gone when you start hiding
Yes,
behind the
I
screen
agree.
like that.
I agree. And
And
it's
yeah,
sad. And you're right. There's so many times you have to be careful of what you say because somebody's going to jump on you and attack you for it. And that's it's just sad. It's just a sad state of affairs, I think.
yeah. I just really appreciate that you gave me a chance
Mhm.
to tell
Oh,
this story.
it's
And
a story that needs to be
I
told.
just really I really wish a ripple effect of forgiveness would come out of
Perhaps it
this.
will.
I have a picture
I'm hoping someone will
on
hear
my
this that
website.
is maybe facing a similar
Yeah.
situation and they choose to forgive and love instead of be bitter and vengeful. And so much more comes out of it. And you're so right. There is no room for love in the court system. And there
Yeah.
should be because being just should be about loving and forgiving and being fair and not vengeful.
Everybody's not ready for it. And true reconciliation takes
Mhm.
both parties. I think the reason we have such a beautiful friendship is because we were both in
Yes.
it together. Um, Deb, the administrative assistant to the state attorney, called me aside one day the same summer, and she said, Kathy, I got to tell you something. She said there was a dad and a daughter. They lost their mom, similar to how you lost your daughter, and they wanted to come here and tell the driver and his dad that they forgave them. I think it was a
Mhm.
teen driver, drunk driver. And she said they met, and so the dad and the daughter said, we just wanted you to know that we
Mhm.
forgive you. And she said, Kathy, then there was this long, awkward pause, and the driver did this. Can we go
Oh,
now? And so not
you're right.
everybody's ready. But here's what I
Mhm.
tell my audience. When you do the right thing, whether you believe in God, but you know this is the right thing, you can lay your head down at night and sleep in peace because you did the right thing. And it's not up to you how they respond. That's on
Mhm.
them. But you do the right thing. You be a person to say, I'm going to do the right thing, even if it's the hard thing. And then you can sleep peacefully and not be eaten up
Yeah.
with bitterness and anger and
Don't you think the
hatred.
right things are always
Yeah.
the hard things?
Probably because
Yeah.
it's our nature to go
Uh,
the wrong way. We're born with that sin
yeah.
nature, the
Yeah.
Bible says. And the only way we can heal that is, through
Yeah.
Christ and the sacrifice he paid for us to get over that. Another good thing that came out of it was at one point, Linda, the driver's mother, her father really needed to quit driving. He was getting to the place where
Mm-hmm.
it was dangerous. And do you know how
Oh,
hard it is to talk to
yes.
your parent and try to take the car keys away from them? Nobody in the family wanted to do that. And then she said, and this was part of her testimony when she spoke with me at our church with her son and husband. She said, nobody in the family wanted to do it. She said, but then I remembered
Oh,
Anna. I didn't want there to be
mm-hmm.
another Anna. So I sat down and talked with my
Mm-hmm.
dad, and nobody else has
Oh,
gotten
yeah.
hurt. So there's a
Yeah,
different
there's
kind
so
of
many
ripple
ripple
effect.
effects of everything we do. And so, shouldn't we be putting loving ripples out into the world?
Wouldn't that
Yes, yes,
change
it
the
would.
world?
It would.
Yeah,
Cathy, thank you
yeah.
so much for your
So
story. And I believe you've written a book, right?
I am
I,
so working on it. I'm on my third or fourth draft, and then I took a pause the last year and a half to help a new writer
Mhm.
with their book. So I hope to get back to it this year and really nail down how do I want to, how much detail needs
Yes.
to go into
I
this and
had
how
so much stuff when I
uh,
wrote my book, and I found the hardest thing to do was to figure out at what moment does the book start and at what moment does it end? And you can still fold past stuff and future stuff into that text, but where's the beginning and where's the end? Because you could
yeah,
start anywhere, multiple places. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yes,
pray for me. I'd
I
like to get
definitely
that
will.
done,
I
get
can't
it
wait
out
to
there.
read it.
And I'm thinking it needs to be shorter in this day and age. People are used to
Yeah.
Twitter and
Mhm.
TikTok and just really short blurbs, but maybe they're not ready for a 300-page
Oh, I
novel.
think they might be. I think you'd be
Uh,
surprised. Yeah.
well, it moves along, that's for sure. And I give some background about Anna
Mhm.
that's helpful, and
Yeah.
the
I think it's
girls.
good.
And
I can't
well,
wait to read it. You're
thank you so
welcome. And we'll
much,
have a
Toby.
link on that in the show notes to Cathy's website, which is Cathy Harvey Purpose.life. So we'll have a link to that and you'll be able to get on her newsletter list and learn when the book comes out. So thank you so much for joining us today, Cathy. I hope that in listening, uh, you'll create more love ripples out there in our audience.
Oh, that
Yes,
would be so
I
wonderful for
agree.
everybody.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Toby.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me on Fierce Conversations with Toby. Your support and listening means so much to me, and I hope today's conversation makes a difference in your world. If you would like to support this podcast, there are many ways to do so. I found these ways tend to help the most in getting our message out into the world. Number 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to or watch this podcast. If you can leave a 5-star rating or a like on this episode on YouTube, that helps even more. And if you leave a comment or a review, that helps the most. The next way you can support Fierce Conversations with Toby is to join our Patreon at patreon.com/Fierce Conversations. All tiers come with a downloadable digital gratitude journal created by me and membership in a private Facebook group that I also lead. Most importantly, 10% of all proceeds from your subscription will go directly to donating my workbooks to women in prison. Finally, sharing the link to this show with your friends, family, and anyone who wants to listen is appreciated more than I can say. Thank you again for joining me today and supporting this show by listening to it and sharing it with friends. Fierce Conversations is created and hosted by me, Toby Dorr. Produced by Number 3 Productions. The theme song that you're hearing now, Groovin', was composed and arranged by Lisa Plass. Lisa also plays the flute for the theme, with Carolyn Parody on piano and Tony Ventura on bass. Find out more at tobydor.com. This is Fierce Conversations with Toby. Escape your prison.